to Emerging Voices, an Emerging Leaders Program podcast series. This is Matt Mark, and along with...
Hi, everyone. It's Bree Harvey.
Bree, I interviewed Sarah Howard in the last episode, and you weren't there.
I know. I'm so sad. Sarah's one of my favorite people. I'm excited to listen to it now.
Yeah.
So that'll be fun.
Well, friend, I'm glad that you're here because we get to chat with another of the mentors from the 2024 to 2026 Emerging Leaders cohort. And that is Mike Geroux, or also known as Mike G. Mike, what's up?
Hey, friends. Good to see you. Happy end of the semester. Happy holidays.
Yeah, and even though this isn't, those that are listening to it right now is probably sometime in 2026, we are recording this in December. And if you're not seeing a video version of this and listening to the audio version of this podcast, Mike G is very festive today.
Yes, I have on my reindeer sweater. It comes out once a year. I wore it just for Bree today.
Just for Bree.
And Bree, what do you have a little cool sweatshirt on?
I do. I have my Buddy the Elf one, and it's the narwhal, and he says, "Bye, buddy. I hope you find your dad."
So
I have a Christmas sweater for like every day in December. So, Mike, if you ever need to borrow one,
I'm good.
So many of varying work appropriateness. There's a scale.
I love it.
Well, Mike, we're glad that you're here. And is this your first rodeo with being a mentor in Emerging Leaders?
Second.
But
the first go around was I was involved, but my leader, other things came up in their life and they weren't able to engage with the program on the level that I know that she would have wanted and what I was kind of looking for right in that experience. So this is my second time as a mentor, but for the three of us and like our other mentors, this is the first time with a pod setup, which is interesting.
Yeah. It's the pod is really, it's a very different vibe. What do you think the biggest difference between the two different buckets are, having a one-on-one versus this pod?
That's a good question. So if I'm thinking about some of our other like mentors who've gone through the program, like Brody and Kevin Thomas and like David Spite and people I interact with regularly, they talk about how they're able to do a real deep dive and kind of really dig in with their leader. And they kind of in that hair really help them, figure out their goals and find their successes and even like the challenges along the way. In the pod setup, I think just knowing that you're going into it and you're working with two leaders at the same time, so you just have to be cognizant of that. And you're like, okay, my attention is kind of divided at times. For me, I'm working with Haley and Eric, and they're doing different things, and those two are absolutely amazing. And so knowing that going into it, we set it up so we do monthly pod meetings, because I think that the one benefit is they get to learn from each other and kind of feed off of each other's experiences. But then I still do one-on-one monthly meetings with them to kind of get at what the original structure of the program was, right? So I'll have an hour with Eric. In fact, we're meeting tomorrow, and then Haley and I are meeting on Friday, and then that's where we can have that like deep dive as to what they're looking to do. So I don't know if I'm sure it'd be interesting to see what like the kind of the feedback is on this new structure. If people find it build a better community, and if it's more conducive for connecting with other mentors, like Matt, like you and I and Sarah met with Cammie that one day early on, like last year. So, or if it's if those connections were already there, I don't know.
So Bree and I have talked like offline about this because I feel like I misunderstood what the pod setup was, or it was changed after they told us what it was. But either way, that's all I'm going to say about it.
Yeah, right.
But I feel it works, and I'm glad that works out for you and your, I guess, pod mates, I guess we could say. I know, like, for Jing and Brandon and I, like, we initially started with doing, like, one-on-ones, and then Jing had the idea of, like, can we just do a, pod meeting together with all of us? That way you can kind of ask each other questions, learn what everyone else each other are doing, and I feel that that's kind of worked out. But tell us more about your pod mates, about your emerging leaders.
Yeah, they're I think they're wonderful. But what you were saying there, Matt, got me thinking as well that the role of the mentor in the pod structure is different, and I don't think it was really clearly articulated as to what we should be doing as mentors, right? And I understand they're trying to leave it kind of open, and each pod can kind of design and meet their own needs. But as mentors, for this class year, I feel in some ways we're doing more than probably mentors were in the past, because we're trying to serve the needs of two leaders, but also serving the needs of the class. So yeah, interesting to we'll talk more offline about that. But Haley and Eric, I mean, wow, like these two, like they didn't need me. Like, let's just call it what it is. They didn't need me. I think anything was just to kind of validate and say, yeah, what you're doing makes sense. And I was more of a sounding board for them, not just with NACADA things, but like with their own professional lives as well. Because both of them, in the time we started working together, have taken new roles. So Eric is still at the same institution, just a different an advisor role in the engineering department, and Haley just moved to Missouri, like new job and new state, like, and she made that move like within like less than a week. And when one job ended, the other one started. She's like, okay, pack the car, I'm out. And like but they are so involved in so many things. And Eric has got very involved in NACADA, and NACADA. I think he's a treasurer in NACADA. He's teaching, doing grad work. Like he's super impressive. And at one point, I think of how this came together. We had a conversation, which I think came off another conversation he had with someone about doing a presentation. Just talking about how he kind of learns to be a good advisor from working with his dog, Kogo. And someone had mentioned that to him, and we have talked briefly about it, and that's something I want him to see him kind of. He did that as like a presentation for something, maybe for a job, and then I want him to like. It'd be great if he does that, like at region and annual, level. And Haley is big into doing mentorship. In her region, she's region 7. She's got the mentorship program going, and we've talked ideas, and I've connected her with Gavin to, if I were to talk more about mentorship, and, to see them like find their place, and they're starting to carve out their niche areas is unbelievable. And I think the cool thing about being a mentor, while it's designed in a way that like they're the mentees or we're the mentors, like I learn so much from them, and I get inspiration from them to remind me that, there's like, keep doing the good things. Well,
I will say, if Eric and the dog presentation happens at region and or annual, and I think Bree and I can say that came out of the podcast.
It sure did. We should get like production credit or something. I don't know how that works.
I was like, great. Like, I'm like, that's where I heard, because yes. I just started listening to his Emerging Voices episode just last week, which is months after it was recorded. And I'm like, yes, that's right. Now it's all coming together. To your point earlier, Matt, how like we're recording this in December, but it'll be released like in March. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was one of the first ones we had. Like, we feel like we could just do a Pets of Emerging Leaders podcast, and I was so distracted by this dog, and it was so sweet. So yeah, I really hope that happens for Eric.
Yes, I hope so.
And I appreciate what you were saying too about like just being there really to facilitate. That's what Matt and I were talking about too. With like, we get together with our pods, and I'm like, you guys know more than I do. Like, I don't need to be here for that. It's wild how achieved these people are. Achieved is not a word. I just made that up. Well, it is, just not in this context. Like they're all killing it. They're all rock stars. And then we walk in and we're like, yeah, I guess just keep doing what you're doing. You want me to make an introduction? Because that person's also doing really well. Right. So that is my contribution to these pods.
Yeah, it's in some ways you almost kind of like reverse mentor it in the sense that you can't do it all. Right. And so I think one of the things that I have done, not just for these two, just in other people I have mentored, is to say, all right, look, you have like these 6 things that you want to do. Right? let's identify 2 or 3 that are going to be our short-term goals, and then think about what's the mid-range and long-term goals. Because like NACADA's not going anywhere. Right? You don't have to do everything right now, which I think people feel that they have to. Like everyone feels like I need to like present at all the conferences, and I need to get involved in all the committees. I have to do it all right now. And I love that enthusiasm, that excitement, but you don't have to do everything right away. Right? Lean into the areas that you are really passionate about, or also understand what's on your plate, right? Both Haley and Eric took on new jobs, okay? And there's a lot that comes with that, especially for Haley moving into a whole different state, right? Yeah, some things that were on the plate might get pushed to the side while you're like settling into your new role. But she's fortunate that Cecilia is at Missouri with her. And so she was talking to me about a job opportunity. And I was like, well, talk to Cecilia. She's got the institutional and cultural knowledge of your institution, and see if does that make sense? Because you're new. I gave her my feedback on it, and she made great connections there. And now she's got someone who is like another mentor right at her institution, which is super important.
Yeah, and I think that's also something us as mentors is also just trying to help them network and get to meet others and learn from them, ask them the questions. Now, you were mentioning in terms of like some of the mentees or the emerging leaders kind of having a lot of goals and wanting to kind of do them all at once.
Right.
Is that something you've had to kind of work with them on? Of like, you have 2 years in this program. We have year 1 goals, year 2 goals, and even after this program, okay, we can save some of these goals for later.
Yeah, we've talked about that, and also I always emphasize that a goal you identify in year 1 can be changed, right? You don't have to meet every goal because of things change in your world, personally or professionally, or opportunity to join a committee comes up. It takes you in a different direction, right? You can adjust your goals. And I'd like to emphasize with the leaders, with anyone that we're working with, anything you do is going to make an impact. This is not a competition. Right, nobody gets a gold star. I don't say this to them like directly, but they get it. Like you don't get a gold star because you did like the most things, right? You have to do what aligns with who you are as an NACADA member. And so we talked about, kind of laid out like some of the original goals and how they're gonna shift. But not all their goals were specifically NACADA related. For Eric, it was ILACADA, which is associated with NACADA. Right? And he wants to do some writing, and he wanted to do a blog post, and he submitted something, and then I was able to kind of gather that the blog isn't really read much anymore. But my one-on-one with him, I'm going to recommend Matt, you and Ryan have the Advising Quarterly.
Yeah, Academic Advising Quarterly. So yeah, please tell Eric to submit something for that.
I'm going to, because he has a piece he wants to write about how he connects wisdom, I think, from Beyonce to life and advising. He is so tuned in.
That's outstanding.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
It's free. It's like it's more about the making the connections, right? It's the connections.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
If you're a podcast host or someone wanting to be interviewed on podcasts as a guest, visit podmatch.com. Podmatch automatically connects ideal podcast guests and hosts together for interviews. We always say it works just like a dating app, but instead of connecting you for dates, it connects you for podcast interviews. Podmatch has connected over 85,000 guests and hosts together for interviews that listeners love, all while saving you countless hours of administrative work through built-in automations. If you're ready to level up your podcast interviews on either side of the mic, start today by visiting podmatch.com.
Yeah. So thinking about kind of your role in this as the connector, if you will, what are some of the goals that you have coming out of the program being a mentor?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think it's important to note that I applied to be an emerging leader like years ago. It was not selected for the program, which is fine. We're dealing with those feelings still several years later. But
just a scooch of lingering trauma.
Right, just a little bit. No, but seriously, and I've talked to other people about this who were not selected for the program. I was like, look, that doesn't mean that you can't find a mentor in NACADA. and you can't do the things that you want to do, right? And that's how what led me to connecting, and working more closely with like Brody and KT, and then eventually connecting with Jenny Bloom, who's now such a wonderful friend and mentoring me and guiding me through my dissertation process. And like Vince from Region 1, we co-authored an AAT article, so you can still find like your people, right? So what I try to do, when we're at conferences, is I try to make connections for people. Like if I'm talking to somebody in the hallway about like peer advising or whatever it may be, and I know someone else who's involved in that, I'm like, hey, you guys met, you're doing the same thing. Like, and I get the conversation started, and then I kind of like just back away and let that happen. So like my goals for being a mentor this year, one was to experience what it means to be a mentor in Emerging Leaders Program in the way that it's really designed to be, and what a lot of like our good friends and colleagues have experienced from a mentor perspective. And I want to feel that connection with the leaders I'm working with and be part of that community. I was half part of it before. I wanted to be fully immersed into it. And then two is helping people find their pathways in their niche areas. If I feel that I was able to make an impact, right, in some small way, to help like Eric and Haley figure out who they are within the association as they're thinking about leadership roles, that's great, right? And I guess three is to be part of like this special group, right? It's not just you're part of the class year. Once you're in Emerging Leaders Program, you're part of a very special group of members and colleagues and friends in the association that I take a lot of pride in, especially as a mentor, right? I don't think you need to have necessarily serve in like the high level leadership positions or necessarily won like a big award. I think there's something that you kind of carry with you. You could say I am or have been a mentor with the Emerging Leaders Program, and people in the association understand like what that means, right? And if people look to you, whether they're in the program or not, they're looking to you for guidance and support and wisdom.
I think that's perfectly said. I'm interested to kind of learn more about your mentors, because you mentioned a few people, and can you tell us more about with some of these mentors, like what got you connected to them, and especially with Jenny Bloom?
Yeah.
I think everybody knows Jenny Bloom.
Everyone knows Jenny, and I'm trying to think. I don't really remember like how we first got connected. It was through somebody else, I'm sure, in a conversation. It was like, like, gee, this is Jenny. And like, I of course know, like, like, oh yeah, I know who Jenny is. But it wasn't like an immediate, like hit it off and started to get, like, we met. I went to a couple of sessions, started talking about PhD stuff and my research, and then just stayed in contact. And now it's become like in fact, I owe her another section of my Chapter 2 draft on January 2nd. So she can edit that section, and we meet regularly. And it's really interesting because she talks about this frequently, about how people think that because she was president and because she's Jenny Bloom, because she was advising all the things, and they're like, oh my God, it's Jenny. And like, and then when you start talking to her, you realize, oh wow, she's just down to earth and just one of the most wonderful human beings I've ever met. And she always goes out of her way to do things for the people that she is connected with and working with, right? So much so that like my research on advising organizational models for my dissertation is based on the work that was done by Wes Hadley back in the 1980s. And when I jumped on one of our Zoom meetings, well, who's on the call but Wes? I'm like, oh my God, right? And again, even that, I was like awestruck. And then we started talking, and I was like, wow, he's just cool, like just a normal guy who loves advising as much as anyone else does. And now we stay in contact. One of the nice things about being in the program for our leaders is it may give them more direct access to connect with mentors that serve the needs, that they have, right? Whereas I've done it kind of on my own, right? So Jenny is serving like my needs as an advising professional, an advising administrator, and a doctoral student. I remember years ago, Brody did the keynote for us at Region 1, and I just was like, wow, I'm like, his vibes, his energy is like, we had a connection, and then we connected through soccer. We stayed in contact. And then Kevin Thomas was one of my faculty for when I did the Virtual Administrators Institute, right? And we just made a good connection. And so when I will talk to them, if I'm doing I had a job interview a while back and I had to do a presentation and I wanted to put a slide in about who I was. And so I was kind of running through ideas with Brody on how to do that. But my first mentor was Vince Moskowski from Region 1. I went to the Emerging Leaders Info session at my first Region 1 conference. And we ended up talking for almost an hour after that session. And we just stayed in contact. And then that led to co-authoring an AAT article. So you find people that will help you grow in different ways. And I like to think of it in the sense that if you have like a triangle and you're at the base of the bottom, you want to think about how you're growing out to then grow up, right? How are you building your foundation in different ways to move upwards? If you go up too quickly, you're not going to have any substance to really offer. You're trying to get to the next level position, right? You got to, kind of experience things, right? And different mentors will serve you in different capacities. And to have people on like a text thread, right? It's just so cool.
Well, I think that's one of the lovely things about NACADA in general is whether or not you're in the ELP program, there are so many people. Like we say all the time, nobody's in this for the money. We're all here because we're passionate about the work, but that translates out to each other as well. It's not just about supporting our students; it's about supporting each other. It's just thriving. It's great. And those connections that we make. And I mean, this is Matt and I talked for a long time in our episode about how he and I met and became connected. And it's the ELP program, I think, does a really great job at making those introductions. If you need help, if you want the help, if you need that person to make that connection for you, because it can be, it's intimidating. There's a lot of people, right? Like it's terrifying, and everybody's so nice, but it's still it's just the introvert in me coming out, but it is still terrifying. So having somebody make those connections for you, I think can be really great. How has this, though, I'd love to hear, so you're talking about your dissertation and your work and your writing and things like that. How has NACADA supported you in your professional life outside of the association?
That's a good question. We talk about like the NACADA family, often, and there's moments and time. So, all right, so it's more like kind of professionally, but a few years ago, I was starting to get to a point in my career where I knew I wanted like the next, a growth opportunity. And I felt like I was getting tired of working directly with students. I love them. They are super important. Without them, none of this works. But I wanted more of the admin, side of things. And I was really struggling with that. I'm like, does that mean that I'm like I shouldn't be advising anymore? Am I not a good advisor? And so I started to talk to Kevin Thomas about this. And he's like, no, Mike, that's a natural progression for someone who wants to move from an advisor to an advising administrator role. It's not that you don't value the students or don't want them or anything like that. It's just that you want to spend more of your time doing like the bigger picture work. And so to have people that you can just reach out to and just be open and honest with, because that is invaluable, right? And there's times where in my current role as an advising administrator, there's times where I might have frustrations or I need to talk things through, but I am literally as to who I might talk to in my own office, because you just don't know who's listening or how it may be taken, right? So you talk to somebody outside your institution who understands what you're talking about. Like that's the key thing. They need to know what you're talking about in the sense of like what academic advising is and what does it mean and all that. You can kind of work through things. And so it validates, first of all, like what it is that you're going through, right? That like the struggles are real. Your feelings are, legit, like your concerns are genuine. And then to kind of come to, some bit of a resolution and how you're working through that has been huge for me. I mean, not everyone is. Some people are fortunate they have a mentor at their home institution or in their office, or they have a mentor relationship with a supervisor. Like I, not so much with my own supervisor. That's just the relationship that we have. But I act very much as a mentor to a lot of our staff. But you need to have those people that you can call upon, when you're struggling, right? Or you're starting to second guess. Is this, like to your point earlier, Bree, like we don't do this for the money, right? But if you start to second guess, like is this where I should be? what I want to be doing, right? And call upon these people to validate that. That's huge. And to then talk to people about how you balance everything, right? I'm very open and honest with people about how I manage my time, right? As an advising administrator that has a caseload, right? So I'm wearing multiple hats throughout the day. As a doctoral student writing a dissertation, as a father of two and a husband, and I am coaching both of my kids' travel teams. Like Natalie, my daughter, is travel basketball. Aiden, my son, plays travel baseball. I'm coaching on both of those teams. So I figure out how to, like, my day starts at 5 or 4 if I have a writing assignment that I have to get to Jenny, right? So I do my writing in the morning. Then that allows me to shift gears and be present in my work during the day. And the end of the day, I shift gears again, and I'm present with my kids and my family. And by 9 o'clock, 9:30, I'm done.
It's a lot. It's a lot to balance, and then the next day repeat the whole cycle again.
Yeah.
But I like that you mentioned about having mentors or just people you can talk to outside your institution. I mean, I think it's great, if you have people that you can talk to at your institution, but having people outside of it, I think, gives you that kind of outside perspective and kind of maybe big picture perspective that maybe we're kind of too zoned in on something very small. Mm-hmm. And to me, they can kind of take the intricacies of a situation and maybe help make sense of it or think of other viewpoints that we're not considering. But you mentioned a couple times with the doctoral program, balancing that with everything else you have to do. You mentioned Jenny Bloom, not only just being a mentor, but also kind of working with you through this process. Tell us more about your doctoral program. Like, what are you doing? Why'd you choose it? How's it all going?
Oh, that's a loaded question. I appreciate you not asking so when are you going to be done and what are you going to do with it? Because that's what everyone asks.
Oh, that's going to be the next question.
I'll ask that one after this one. That'll be my next question. So prepare yourself emotionally.
Oh, I should have put some Baileys in the coffee this morning. So, yeah, it's been a journey. So, I guess it's first. I should start with that there is no time frame for doing this type of work. Right, I'm 47. I think I lose track, but I started as a non-degree student in fall of 18. So I was taking classes towards a program, but not core requirements. And then I matriculated in fall 2020, and I've been working through since then. And I chose to do mine part-time. So I do one course a semester, right? Because as I mentioned a few minutes ago, with my full plate, that's all I was able to do, one course this semester. And that's what worked for me. I didn't do any summer courses, work through it systematically. And for me, I had a couple moments of these aha moments. And one was, before I even got into the program, I was getting very involved in the advising literature, reading the journal. Remember when the journal used to come out in print? You get the hard copy. I'm a hard copy. I print everything. I love the environment and the outdoors, but I also, I'm killing some trees because I cannot absorb things if I'm reading on a computer. So there's this piles at home of articles and books. But getting involved in the advising literature and engaging in those conversations, to your point earlier, Matt, talking to experienced advising professionals and administrators and talking to mentors and understanding how they perceive things and what they think about, what Brody is thinking about in his role as an advising administrator makes you think about things. I might think about something differently. So I was already in that flow, right? That mindset. And then I started to think about my career trajectory. And I work at a public institution, the University of Albany, is part of the SUNY system, so the public institution. And in my first grad class for the program, my professor, Dr. Anne Marie Murray, who has been president of several community colleges in New York State, one of which was actually where I grew up. It's ironic. I didn't know that she was there at the time, but I was a little kid. But she said to me, Mike, if you want to get a seat at the table in public higher ed, she's the credentialing is going to matter. And she's that doesn't need to be that's not your sole reason for doing the program. If you want to eventually get a seat at those key tables where you're making key decisions on big decisions. So the credentialing is going to matter. So you just need to know that. Now, if you stay in the private higher ed sector, not so much. So I was like, okay, just something to think about. But for me, it was an opportunity to just do a deeper dive like in the literature, and it kind of fed my soul because I'm like, this is awesome. Now, not every class was great, like I'll admit, but a lot of them were really, really interesting. And I just met with one of my advisors last week, and we were talking about how one makes that transition from a student to a scholar, particularly in the dissertation phase. So in the dissertation phase, takes a long time. I'm doing mine part-time. We have some students in our program that are more cohort based, but it's not a strong cohort model like you would find in the Kansas State Advising Leadership Program that NACADA is affiliated with, right? That's a true cohort program, right? My program is, many of us are in the program are full-time professionals, parents doing it part-time. So you're on your own. You're kind of like halfway. But when I got to the dissertation, I adjusted my topic several times and landed on stakeholder satisfaction under different advising organizational models, looking at it from a contingency theory approach. So stakeholders really, for my research, is advising administrators, like mid-level, like assistant directors, associate directors, and then senior level, which would be like executive directors, like deans, the people on those levels. And the contingency theory approach is essentially saying that different situations require different styles of leadership. And what I'm interested to understand is how do advising administrators adjust their approaches based on the reporting lines of the advising model, right? Is it under academic affairs or under student affairs? How do they perceive the benefits of a particular advising model institution? How do they live in that space? Did they have a say in the design of the advising organizational model, or did somebody above them say, we're doing this and you have to make it happen? So it's trying to fill some gaps in the literature in the sense that no one's really looked at the connection between an advising administrator and an advising model. There's been research done on students success, persistence, and retention with advising structures and advising models, but not the administrator side. And my topic started with looking at the lived experiences of advising administrators, and then I moved it over to advising organizational models based on the recommendation from my chair, who specializes in organizational models and structures. And then the advising piece, and this is where Jenny is so instrumental, she's checking what I'm writing, and she's the one who can tell me this aligns, this doesn't make sense, right? What are you trying to say here? But it's very interesting because I remember as an undergrad, I knew what the library was at in my institution because I was a tour guide, right? That's the only reason I knew where the library was, because I'm like, oh yeah, I pointed out on the tour, right? Did not meet my academic credential as an undergrad. You fast forward 7 years after undergrad to my master's, and that's where I started to find my rhythm as a student and did well in a master's program. 10 years later, now as a doctoral student, I'm like the informal resource library for my staff. People are coming to me and saying, hey, I need an article on X. I'm like, hold, I got some ideas for you. I'm sending people things. But the key piece is, for anyone considering a doctoral program, whether it be a PhD or an EDD, and a lot of people now are doing JDs, which it's fine as well, is understanding that it's more about the persistence than it is about the intelligence piece, right? It's all about the persistence. You need to figure out how it's going to mesh with your life, and you have to have your own purpose for doing it. And you can't sprint through this. Right? I finished my coursework a year and a half ago, right? And the dissertation process, it takes longer when you're not doing it full time, right? And you have to find a topic that you are passionate about, because you are spending so much time researching it that if you don't enjoy it, it's going to be a lot. And I'm at the moment at the point in my program where most people will stop out. Most doctoral students in the program will go through all the coursework and they get to dissertation phase, and then that's when they're like, I don't know if I can do this, right? But there's no race. I don't need it to do the job I'm doing right now, right? It will come in handy though down the road. I know that.
No, that's totally fair. And so I'm not gonna ask you when you're gonna be done.
It's okay. You can. I'll tell you.
No, it's okay. So thinking about, you mentioned kind of finding your rhythm, and I mean, I think it's true for a lot of students, not all, but a lot of students, that their undergraduate isn't always their best work. And
Right.
often it is a second or a post degree or something like that,
Right.
or master's, where they find their rhythm. And then like 12 minutes ago, you also mentioned being a mentor for your staff. How do you use kind of what you're learning on finding your rhythm throughout your own educational journey in mentoring the staff through their career path?
That's a great question. From the student side, it's a little bit easier in the sense that I will share with my students, like my authentic approach to advising is I share with my students my struggles as an undergrad and how like I did not do well. I failed classes. I wasn't on the right pathway. When they say, no, you're making it up, I'm like, all right, hold, I'll pull out the undergrad transcript and show them that. And so the student conversation is like some ways coming together easier in that context. With staff, I like to ask staff, particularly those I'm supervising, like, let's talk about your short-term, mid-range, and long-term goals, right? So when we joke about, saying, well, don't ask me when I'm going to be done, because if all goes well, all right, when everyone is listening to this recording, which will be like maybe March, I hopefully will be very close to defending my proposal, which is just the first part of that, right? To go in front of the committee to say, I want to study this, and this is why and how I'm going to do it, right? So my goal is to defend my proposal in the spring of 26, which if I can then get things moving quickly, could potentially defend dissertation in spring of 27. We'll see. Fingers crossed. But I find that staff sometimes have a hard time thinking about like where they're going and like what their goals are, because everything, like people tend to default to like time, like specific time frames. 3 to 5 years, 7 to 10 years, whatever. And it was from a session, and I don't remember who did this. It might have been Terry Farr when she's talking about how you have to invest in your own professional development. It was at annual, and somebody, or it might have been a Brody session. Somebody was talking about breaking it down into short-term goals, mid-range goals, and long-term goals. And I talked to staff about how do you want to grow in this space, right? Within our office, at the institution, like, beyond, like, what makes sense to you. And I give staff, just like I do with my students, using an appreciative advising approach of disarming. And then I discover, because I ask a lot of questions, where people aren't asking them these questions, right? And they're not being kind of challenged in a way of thinking about where they want to go. But also back to some of our earlier points, we're a large staff. We have like 45 people on staff, and it's hard to get past this competition idea, right? And to helping staff realize that, all right, well, you're new, right? So let's talk about some of the things you're interested in, and then let's make a game plan similar to how we're doing it with emerging leaders, and how we're going to move forward in that sense, and how we're going to be open about challenges we might encounter along the way. Or if you're going in one direction and then you can get an opportunity to join a committee in the office or on campus, and just say, that's okay to go in that direction. But to your point, Bree, I would talk to staff about how I didn't get into advising until I was like in my mid-20s. I didn't really find my like specialized area until I came to UAlbany and got involved in peer advising. And then when I stepped into my role as an assistant director, which was January 2020, I had to give up the peer advising program because there was no room for that. And that was a hard decision. That was a hard thing to do. It is finally in the hand of two phenomenal colleagues of mine who are co-coordinators, but something that I built from a group of 6 students to like 25, and it was a phenomenal program that I presented on. To pass that on, that's a hard thing, to do. So a lot of our conversations, like when we have with our students, I try to do with the staff and to say, you're going to have challenges, you're going to have bumps, you're not going to get everything correct every time, right? You may go, when you decide you want to be more involved in pre-law, and then you say, yeah, I don't know if I really want to do that, and I want to go in a different direction. Cool, right? Like we have to encourage growth, and we have to encourage this, idea that we can try things with our staff, and we also have to practice, giving them grace and space, and allow them to fail. Like, so it's like the motivational speaker mentor comes out in me when I'm talking to staff, because I've been there, right? And I've tried things, and not all of them go well, and they don't always do everything correctly, but we're human. right? And then I think if you do have those moments, you can then use that experience to help others understand that, okay, yeah, I failed. Get back up. Right?
And you're leading by example, and I think what you're also showing them is the opportunities that are out there as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, and the example that you're kind of giving, that you're showing like your staff, is that you're still professionally growing. You know, the doctoral program, attending conferences, still networking, presenting.
Right.
Which, speaking of presenting and conferences, I mean, yes, by the time this comes out, you would have already done this, but you have a virtual conference coming up at the end of January that you're presenting on.
Yeah.
Share a little bit about that.
Yes, we are actually. Where do my notes go? And are you presenting in that one, or is it Ryan?
No, Ryan and I are. Yeah, we're presenting on how you could use the Karate Kid movie to discuss and show appreciative advising techniques.
Oh my God, I so hope that we're not presenting at the same time, and I am able to go to your session. I've gotten much more involved in the appreciative education group, and I have was a facilitator assistant for the Appreciative Advising Institute a couple summers ago, and so for this particular conference, the online the Appreciative Education conference, I'm a Zoom room host, and so I will be like the Zoom host for one of the sessions. I think it's later in the day. I got that information the other day, and then I have my presentation. So hopefully I can go to yours, because that would be awesome. But anyways, yeah. So I through this like working with Jenny and like her team, connected with Megan Ellsbury a long time ago. We've stayed in contact, and it was at one of the meetings. It was like a brainstorming session. I think Michael Geroux set up like a little like kind of brainstorming session, and anytime I'm in a room, whether it be in person or virtual, I just want people to connect. I just love to connect people. And I find that sometimes people are just hesitant to just put out an idea or to say, I'd love to do this, but I really don't want to do it alone. So I like to be like that person that brings everyone together. Recognize that some people are quiet or shy or introverts. Also, I've learned recently that I am an extrovert introvert, that I now really appreciate quiet time in the morning so that I can be more like outgoing during the day, but that's another thing. But anyways, to answer your question, Matt, Megan and I connected, and we started talking about advising administrators and appreciative advising and how you can use the 6 phases in your work as an administrator and a mentor. So our session is talking about the lived experiences of higher ed administrators utilizing appreciative education in their leadership practices. And so we're ideally looking to develop a session. They'll talk a little bit about the 6 phases and about appreciative education, talk about what it means to be like an administrator. She's coming from the lens of student affairs. She's more in the rest life world. I have the academic affairs side. But we want to, or when this goes live, we'll say we hope that we did. We hope that it worked well to create a virtual space for other administrators to join that session and to start to engage in a dialogue and to learn from one another. And I think that's the one thing I learned a long time ago is like when I'm presenting, I'm not in any way, shape, or form saying that I'm the expert on anything. It says that I'm very much invested and interested in X topic or X project, and I want to share some of that with hopes that someone might pick up on a little nugget in that session and then take that and run with it when they go back to their own institution. So we're going to try to give some insight and information, but build in space for people to collaborate and connect and talk and because I always learn from people when I'm in sessions, right? That's why I love going to your and Ryan's sessions.
Mine too, Mike G. Good grief.
Are you doing the appreciative education?
No.
No. But when more at conference, at annual, and yes, your sessions as well, Marie. Yes. So, yeah.
Oh, I love that. I'm just giving you a hard time.
I appreciate you.
I'm very curious about this because as an attendee, when people say, let's talk in small groups, it makes me want to throw up in my shoes. So how do you, as an extrovert introvert, balance that, like, yes, I get jazzed by this, I don't want to talk about this, but also strangers are terrifying and everything's terrifying and the world is terrifying. And now you want me to talk to a stranger.
That's tough. I mean, it's a tough balance. And I feel I'm just so like in love with the work that I'm doing and the work that we all do. That sometimes just having a common theme or common something, that we're all like kind of centered around just helps, right? And I think sometimes it's easier in person, right, than it is in a virtual setting. Just to ask people sometimes just small questions, like, what's been good this morning? What's one good thing that's happened, like, today? What's one win that you had, like, this week? So we just want to put questions like in the chat that people kind of, can kind of lean into, and then we'll try to make those connections. But I see Bree, they had a great moment working with a student on academic probation, and I see, Matt had said something similar. And I said, like, Matt, do you want to like tell us a little more about how that went, or agree, like what was a good takeaway from from that moment? And nice, I guess, in a virtual sense, like for people who don't want to speak out loud, right? Then you can just do it through the chat, right? And that's an important piece, but also can be a difficult piece as a presenter in a virtual setting, is to really pay close attention and monitor that chat, right? And engaging with people through the chat as well as the people like on the Zoom, screen. Which I think if you're co-presenting, you can set it up that way. And I think me and others are gonna try to do that, to put in some thoughtful questions, but then to not let them go unanswered. Even if it's just a quick like, hey, I hear you, been there, or like even just try to build some connections so people can take that and say, hey, I want to continue this conversation like afterwards. Yeah, like that. We'll do that as well.
Great advice. And I think Bree and I, as we're doing these, like we could chat with everyone for hours and hours and hours. But unfortunately, we reached time with this one. I mean, time flies. Like, I was just looking and I'm like, oh my God. The same thing happened with Sarah. I was like, we're chatting and then I'm like, oh, it's time to end this recording.
I just glanced over and it was like, wow, it's almost noon my time.
Yeah, Bree and I are still waking up over on our side over here. But
to be fair, though, even if it was noon, I would still be waking up. Like, I'm always just waking up. It doesn't matter if it's 10 a.m. or 3 p.m.
Well, Bree, to that point, I take into just saying good morning, like, to people throughout the entire day.
Yeah,
right?
Always.
Like, and it's funny because I'm like, 2:00 in the morning, if I see someone I haven't seen yet, say, good morning. They're like, it's 2:00, and I'm like, and now we're engaged in a conversation.
So smart. This is great, Mike. Thanks so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I always love catching up and chatting, and I really hope to see both of you in person soon. It's been too long.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I'll see you virtually in January, and then hopefully in person in October.
Yeah, that's my goal, to be there in October. So, Bree, October?
Hopefully.
All right,
hopefully.
Good. We'll celebrate.
That sounds good.
Have a wonderful holiday season, you two.
You also.
Thank you. Keep in touch.